Hi, my name's Bill Sturgeon. This is Discussion from the Berkshires. Welcome back. Been a nice Christmas break for us. I have a really interesting, informative, and a show that really can be upsetting. It's about domestic violence. And I get three people here. I'm going to have them introduce themselves because, like anything else, once you bring something out into the light, then we can all start to solve the problem. Our district attorney, Andrea Harrington, excuse me, she's started a domestic violence task force, and just recently, within the past week, convicted a person of domestic violence, and they got the maximum sentence for a county jail. And if I'm wrong, she can correct me. She went to law school. I drove by one. So I'll start with Kyle. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Kyle Schadler. I am the program manager of the Intimate Partner Abuse Education Program here in Pittsfield.
Beautiful. And this lady here I've known forever.
I'm Janis Broderick. I'm the executive director of Elizabeth Freeman Center, which is the organization that addresses and provides leadership around domestic and sexual violence.
And I will introduce this lady. This is the district attorney of Berkshire County, Andrea Harrington.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here today.
I think, first of all, let me applaud your efforts in this. By putting together this task, and this is just a few of the people that are on it. It's bringing it to the forefront. It's always, in my opinion, as an old cop, everybody's always known about it. I grew up off of Cohen Street. I could tell you who's who in the zoo on that street, is even today, the houses. But to bring it out, start to address it, start to look at the causes, and thank God for Elizabeth Freeman. No, really.
He always makes me blush on these shows.
and Janis. So we did a radio show, and why we're doing this show, let me tell you, I was blown away. Now, I knew that the statistics were high. I didn't realize just how high they are for Berkshire County. So anybody want to take that?
Sure. I mean, it's always a struggle because people think violence doesn't happen here.
Right.
I think people are becoming more and more aware that violence happens here because in the last 3 years, just the last 3 years, we've had 9 domestic violence murders. From the tip of the county in Clarksburg to way down south in Sheffield. And this has been, this has been pretty tragic, but I think it also has kind of galvanized people to come together and work. But our rate of protection orders is 33% higher than the state average. Consistently, at least 3 of our cities and towns rank in the top 10 of communities reporting in terms of rates of rape by population. And just with our organization, we work with well over 2,000 survivors every year from almost every city, town, and hamlet in Berkshire County. So it happens everywhere.
And I think that's important. I will just say this from my experience. It shoots the whole spectrum of society. I think there's people out there who say, well, it only happens here. No. It happens up here too. Sometimes they're just better off covering it up for social purposes and things like that. And so let's watch this program with an open mind. 1, I would ask. 2, I would also ask that you watch it with an open mind, but also a commitment to start doing something about it. You know, I used to tell, when I was in my old life, I'm going to judge you not only on your behavior, I'm also going to judge you on your performance. So, if you watch this program, these are the folks that deal with it every single day now. Listen to what they have to say, see where you can fit in and get involved. This has to stop. I mean, just since Christmas, there's been,
Right.
unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable.
Just this weekend, we responded to 5 rapes
Yeah.
at the hospitals. So it's concerning, but what's happening now, I think, is also very hopeful.
Well, in my office, we've been able to build on the good work started by Janis and the
Yes.
Elizabeth Freeman Center. And from our perspective, it's our role as prosecutors to work with law enforcement in holding people accountable,
Sure.
in getting people out of our community who are dangerous people. But beyond that, it's my goal to prevent people from being victimized in the first place, and to find real solutions that can help families heal and grow together, and so that we can have a healthier community. And I think Kyle can definitely speak to the work that he does with batterers. So it's a really multi-layered approach, and it goes to my promise to the voters that my office will work to distinguish between people that are dangerous and belong behind bars and people who need help. And I think when you look at domestic violence, you see people who fall different places on that spectrum. But I think that as a community, we need to call out domestic violence for what it is. It's a crime. It's often relates back to people's ideas about gender roles. And it's, we need to change the culture in Berkshire County around domestic violence so that we can start to solve this problem.
Kyle, you work right in the trenches. You and Janis, and well, the 3 of them. The prosecutor, the Janis, who has probably, I'm going to say, saved more lives than
Well, not me personally.
No, but the Elizabeth Freeman Center. But it's. And we all know that everything is leadership. If you've got great leadership, ask Tom Brady. But seriously, Kyle, you're in the trenches. What do you see?
Well, we see a lot.
Yeah.
My job as program manager of the Intimate Partner Abuse Education Program, formerly known as Batterers Intervention. The state changed the name, and so we are the only DPH certified batterer intervention program in Berkshire County.
Okay.
And so I started this venture along with Janis about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There was no batterer intervention program in Berkshire County for a few years, for various reasons. And then we were tasked with starting it, and so 5 years ago we started with one group, and now we have 5 groups up and running. We service anywhere between 50 and 70 men. At one point or another. We use evidence-based curriculum to help educate these men on ways to be nonviolent and to be able to work within their relationships, and most importantly, to keep the survivors safe. That is our ultimate goal, is to keep the survivors safe. And hopefully through education we can do that. And so we try, and we try, and we try, and we continue to try. And I think with the support and the working relationships we have with Elizabeth Freeman Center and probation, the DA's office, Department of Children and Families, we're kind of all working collaboratively together, and spearheaded by the task force that the DA has started. And I believe we're going to continue to work at it and make some headway.
Yeah, I do want to step back and what's changed from my first experiences with it. What's changed is there isn't the smokestacks like before. Law enforcement, and our hands were tied in those days before they changed the law. And then I think you're right. What the DA has started, the collaboration is what I believe will catapult us into success.
I really agree with you on that. And one of our projects that we're working on with the task
Right.
force is our community book read of No Visible Bruises.
Yes.
And that is very much the theme of that book. It's a public health problem-solving approach to domestic violence, and the overarching theme is that we need different actors within the system communicating and collaborating
Yes.
with one another. So that is a part of the goal of the task force, and we're working on bringing something called a high-risk team here to Berkshire County that actually started. It was the result of a really tragic domestic violence homicide that occurred here in Massachusetts. And these programs have shown to be very successful
Yeah.
in other parts of the community. So that's something that is a statewide effort to start more high-risk teams. So that's going to be, in this upcoming year, in 2020, that's going to be something that we're going to be working with law enforcement on.
And I think the intervention, the new law, there's a lot of misnomers out there, Janis. Right? I mean, my work with violent youthful offenders that were in the penitentiary, when you talk to them, you find out that their logic, their thinking is illogical. You know, they're like, I'll never forget this one guy. He said, "Yeah, I'm here, beat up my girlfriend. You know, she deserved it." My father used to have to take my mother aside every so often, and I'm thinking, really? My house was the other way around. My mother used to take my father aside. And I don't want to minimize it. It's a very complex problem, but I want to capitalize on what you said, and that is, in my opinion, all violence is a public health problem. The criminal justice system is how we deal with violent people, but violence in and of itself, I believe, is a public health problem. And I've been beaten up for that for 50 years. But I do believe it. And I believe we can train our way, educate our way. I'm not sure we can punish our way out. We can put them in jail. 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, whatever. That doesn't cure the problem.
No, it doesn't cure the problem, and that's a step-by-step kind of individual by individual
Right.
sort of approach. But I think that's important because we see people all the time just living in terror, just waiting for the next thing to happen.
You have to have the hammer.
But I think, the other thing that's coming out of the task force is, and go back to what you said in terms of the, kids incarcerated,
Yeah.
seeing their father
Yeah.
treat their mother that way. I mean, if we do not deal with domestic violence in our community, we're just going to keep growing future generations of abusers and victims. So it really, we need to not only respond to current situations, and that's really important, but also kind of think about, teaching our kids better ways of relating to each other and what a healthy relationship is, and, how to respect themselves and to respect others. And I think that's one of the things that's really coming out of the task force. I mean, there's lots of working committees being formed. There's lots of different people at the table, from throughout the county. We have, the DA's office, we have agencies working directly with these issues. We have schools at the table. We have, mayors at the table. We have, just all sorts of folks at the table. And, that's the great part of collaboration. I mean, I think we've all identified prevention and working with our kids as a primary goal of ours, but it's also one of the most underfunded services in the state and in federal funding. So
Well, and
there has to be a turnaround.
And in our groups, we hear it over and over and over again that the men who come into our program, just off the top of my head, 90 to 95% of them have witnessed domestic violence as children. And so they come up, they are raised with these ideals about this power and control, and there is nothing. At that point, there was nothing in the schools to help these young boys kind of, understand this and understand that it doesn't have to be that way. So I think prevention is huge, and that's what I love about what we're doing with the task force is we're really seeing that as an opportunity for us to get ahead of it instead of always, being behind it and trying to pick up the pieces behind it.
And as I have often said this, and even in my work with violent youthful offenders, let's put our money into preschool, training, education, identification, all these things, and the public health thought. Because it's easier to bring up kids with good values so that they don't do these things than when they're 14, try to unwind all the bad stuff they've been doing since they were toddlers. And I mean, my thought is, congratulations to you, District Attorney Harrington, for bringing this to light, because this, I don't want to say, how do I say this? I'm not very good. This isn't really a topic people want to hear about, as I found out when we did the morning show. But it's a topic we have to hear about.
It's critical for public safety for individuals in our community. It's critical for public safety for our law enforcement in particular.
Right.
There is a strong correlation between people who commit domestic violence who end up committing violence against law enforcement officers, who commit shootings in our community. So, this is not just about protecting individuals, although that's an important piece, but there are larger public safety issues at play.
And going back to what Kyle said too, that the more education, some people that I can think of, even today, I read the newspaper or I listen to the scanner, in the names, I was dealing with their grandfathers. Maybe their great-grandfathers. So it's, I think you nailed it. If we can stop it at this level, the youth level, then otherwise it just just repeats itself and repeats itself.
Yeah, I mean, but you have to deal with it on a broader level, though, right? You can't just deal with this in the schools. You have to think about the context in which kids are growing up, the cultural messaging that's going on. And so it really has to be a multi-pronged, very inclusive, collaborative effort.
Right.
And I think, again, this is what the task force can do for us. And I just want to say, so Andrea was referring to the community read that's going on called around No Visible Bruises by Rachel Louise Snyder. I mean, I've said this before, whoever came up with this idea is brilliant, because it really there's groups all over the county. I think there's been about 50 community discussions scheduled reading this book.
Sure.
And this book brings out so many important issues in such a powerful manner that this is a lot of momentum that's building in this community. And it has, of course, I was very serious in reading it, as you can see on my little sticky notes, but it has some great, points to jump off from as a community in terms of, initiatives we can take on, including the high risk.
Everybody in the community can get something out of this book, and thanks to generous support from our sponsors, my office sent copies of this book to every police chief in Berkshire County. We sent copies to every judge in Berkshire County, and the author of the book will be visiting Pittsfield at the Colonial Theater on February 6th. It's a free event, and we really are encouraging people to come and to be part of the conversation.
In that, you're going to give me some on that. I want people to do that. I'll be announcing it on the morning show. February 6th, the Colonial time?
5:30.
5:30. Free. Can't beat that. Get there and listen to this author, be part of the... And that's the other thing about why we're doing this show. I want you part of the discussion. Don't be sitting out there on the bleachers saying, oh, they'll do it, they'll take. No, you got to be part of it. If you know something's going on, either approach the person or approach whatever. And there's a lot of things you're going to learn from these ladies and gentlemen and this author that I could never figure it out. I was a young cop, and then I started really inquiring about it, and boy, there's not an easy fix. It's not like take this pill and your headache will go away. It's a very complicated, complex thing, dynamics that go on in these. Mm-hmm. You know, and I shared, Janet knows this because she's probably tired of hearing about it. I met Janis a long time ago, and I got to tell you, this really, I can't say enough great things about her and the Elizabeth Freeman Center. They do great work, and so support them if you can. But
And our services are free and confidential. You can
Right.
reach us 24/7 if you need help or have questions or concerns about yourself or someone you know. And we all know someone. I mean, that's another
Right.
point that's brought out very strong in this book. I mean, there is, violence does not discriminate. It can happen to anyone, but people don't talk about it. Rachel Louise Snyder talks about, after she wrote this book and she's visiting her stepmother who's dying, and her stepmother disclosed to her that she had an abusive first husband. It was the first time she was told that. I mean, and the same thing happened to me in my family, where a relative disclosed to me only after I had worked here for 5 years at Elizabeth Freeman Center, even though we grew up close. We were both kind of renegades, I guess. I don't know, but close, and it, it didn't come out until I was working at Elizabeth Freeman Center for a long time, and I walk anywhere and I get stories, buying groceries, getting flowers, just anywhere. People are out there. They're just, it's shrouded in silence and shame, and it is not our shame to be survivors.
The worst one I ever had, a domestic violence situation, was the woman was badly beaten. I mean, and that's before we could arrest, unless we thought she was going to die. But I went ahead and arrested him. And to my captain's dismay, who lectured me. But long story short, he called me out at the station. He said, here, come here, idiot, is what he said. Here's an exact quote. Idiot, come here. Look, there she was, in her nightgown, with her hospital band on, bailing him out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? And he said, that's why you don't get involved. Old mentality.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying, ow, ow.
I know. But, he said, now, you know what he's going to do? He's going to sue you.
Well, what he was probably going to do is really punish her.
Right.
For
Yeah.
coming forward. I mean, that's, the stories in these books, this is a hard book to read. I just
Yeah.
want to give a warning. It's an important book to read, but it's a hard book to read. But it talks a lot about, the process of escape. A lot of
Yeah.
the factors that feed into that. There's kids, there's finances
Well, that's
altogether,
what she told me.
there's love. I mean, people love people. They have hope that someone will change.
Optimism,
But also, when you start to escape, that is the most dangerous time. The lethality risk increases by 75%. We have to be smart, and I'm just saying, we can help with that. We're
Yeah.
very, our folks are very skilled and passionate about it, but you have to understand that all those dynamics are going on, and we don't have the best options for survivors of violence in this culture. I mean,
Right.
you have to have tremendous courage, and you sacrifice a lot initially, but you can get by that and have a new life.
And I don't mean to keep going back to it, but that's why you also need collaboration.
Right.
So Elizabeth Freeman Center is an excellent agency, but they can't do it alone.
Right.
They need law enforcement, they need DCF,
Yep.
they need the DA's office, probation, they need betters intervention programs like the one I manage.
And I think just quick, the Batters program that you run, and this has been my experience in the criminal justice, most especially correction, they were raised with it. It's okay with them. You know what I mean? They saw their grandfather do it. I mean, and I don't mean every one of them, but in many of them, that's where I think your programs are really beneficial. Because what I would say is, you want your kid to be beaten up? You know, I had a kid locked up. He had 3 kids. Okay. 2 girls and a boy. He didn't know the girls' names. So, and I don't know if can't remember whether domestic violence was in his past, but he certainly, when talking with him, didn't refer to females kindly. That's nice. But going back, you brought this to light.
Well, my experience working in the courts as a defense attorney and also doing domestic relations law, you know, I really have seen that persistent attitude and culture in the courts that victims, sort of like the woman, like your old boss's response, that victims cannot be helped, that they are, for whatever reason, their psychological makeup is that they will not get out of this abusive relationship. And this book really turns that idea on its head. And it demonstrates that victims are actually behaving in a perfectly rational way, given their life circumstances and their history, and that the question is not why doesn't the victim leave. The question we need to be asking is why are these abusers behaving in this way and physically hurting and in some instances murdering the people who they supposedly love. Like that's the question that we need to be asking ourselves as a community, and that's part of the work of the task force, is to help people first understand like this is what the conversation should be about, and this is how we're going to change that culture. And in my office, you know, we see a big opportunity by collaborating with law enforcement so that when there are those instances where a victim does test the waters and try to get some help, that there is real help there, and that we demonstrate both to the victim and to the perpetrator that what the perpetrator has done is against the law, and that there is help, and that we are going to intervene, so that when somebody gets a restraining order, so that when somebody calls the police, they're going to do a proper investigation, and they're going to provide us, my office, with the details that we need so that we can have people held because they're dangerous. It's really important that victims and perpetrators get those signals when they reach out for help. And that's what we've done a lot of work in my office so that we can improve our response in working with law enforcement. And I've been really, really proud and happy of the response that we've gotten from our local officers.
Cool. I want to go back to one thing you said, Janis, because this is what I found. The escape is the most dangerous. I agree. But you know what is also dangerous? The serving of the restraining order.
It's
very dangerous.
as Andrea
for law
says, these are some of the most
Right.
dangerous cases for police officers. Not only serving, but going back to a home to retrieve belongings. We
Right.
had a police officer shot and killed in Springfield, right? We had police officers in Pittsfield attacked.
Oh, I know.
So, yeah, no, these...
But the thing too is, law-abiding people will take the restraining order for the most part. Rational people. And say, okay, I can't do it. I'd love to know what percent of those there are. Because I've known them to we've served the restraining order, and a half an hour later, we're at the house, the door's down. I can think of a scenario right now with my old partner who's passed away, Dick Hennall. We were there, and next thing you know, literally, the door came down. Flew open, and there was the husband who was as much shocked as we were when he saw us there. Because he was coming back again in
Yeah.
cuffs. But the point, what would he have done? And this haunts me even to today. This is 50 years or 40 years ago. What would he have done if we weren't there? You're 100% right. And you know, and believe me, Janis is an expert in this. They all are. That's a dangerous time. That restraining order is a piece of paper making an assumption that the person you serve it on, if he doesn't beat you up, or try to, is going to adhere to it.
Yeah. I think that's why you listen to the survivor. The survivor
Right.
knows the abuser best. Restraining orders can work, and they have worked
Yeah.
wonders in terms of keeping people in their homes. I mean, in addition to like real safety planning and
Right.
supports, right? But survivors know if a restraining order is going to make things more difficult for them, you know. I mean, we try to talk to people about their options, and so does the, DA's office when people come to court, so that they know what kind of, things to consider. But you're right. Yeah, they don't always work, but sometimes they really do.
No, and that's
and
true.
I think also, with the dangerousness hearings, and they've been going on in more cases since Andrea's been in office, that's been really helpful to kind of contain things.
I had told Andrea that 3 weeks ago that she was on the show, the morning show, the one you love to come on.
Not a morning person.
You need an afternoon show.
I know. You're right. I need it. I thought of that this morning driving over here at minus whatever it was. What was that movie? Oh, Dark 30. But just to bring it all out, bring it together, and look at the thing. This has to be done. But part of the thing is the dangerousness hearings. There was a big hoopla about, I gotta do away with bail. Oh my God, the streets will be riddled with killers. Well, I think personally, the dangerousness hearing is a better way to go. That's my opinion, and of course, everybody knows the views and opinions expressed on this program are mine. Those are my guests. But I really do believe that, because if I'm a upper middle class guy and I beat up my spouse, significant other, whatever, and I have money for bail, that doesn't make me less dangerous. It just makes me having money for bail.
Right.
And I think that's a piece of that movement that people didn't catch. Doesn't make you less dangerous. You're still a danger, you just have money to make bail.
Well, change is hard, and I believe in that it's important to lower incarceration rates. And in order to do that, it's critical that people in our community be safe and that they feel safe. And so we really see our efforts to have people held pre-trial, which is an extreme measure, and we use it judiciously, but those efforts are really critical to the work that we do to protect the public and to protect individuals. Officers have been doing a fantastic job at providing us with the information in their police reports that we need so that we can determine if it's warranted for us to ask for people to be held as a danger. There's a new initiative that's statewide for officers to start using domestic violence assessment worksheets and strangulation worksheets, and that's another tool for us to collect that information that we need. So we did a 2-day training at Williams College for local law enforcement. We had about 50 officers from all over the county, from 15 different law enforcement agencies came to our 2-day training. And part of the training was we had a police chief from Greenfield came, and he trained officers on the use of these worksheets and why they're really critical and helpful. So I'm going to be talking to the chiefs coming up soon, and our goal is for this year to get every officer in Berkshire County to use those worksheets so that we can continue to make good decisions in who we're asking to be held pretrial.
And it's just another tool for them. You know, they're the worst. I mean, I've been in a lot of different. They're domestic, especially very aggressive domestic violence case. They're hard. That's a hard call. I mean, to manage when you get there, your emotions are out of lag. You get, you know, you have all these situations going on. Love, hate, abuse, non-abuse. I mean, I can remember just the trying to sort things out, if stop people from screaming at each other and, you know, all kinds of stuff.
And, you know, I sometimes victims don't act the way officers might expect them to act.
Right.
And they don't necessarily seem like they want the help of the officers. And we had a survivor come and speak, and she talked about that phenomenon and why she behaved the way that she did when officers would come to intervene. And I think that's something that Janis and Kyle could speak to better than me. And I think it was really important for officers to understand that just because you have a victim there who says that they don't want your help, that does not necessarily absolve law enforcement from intervening.
Well, and I think it's about training, and it's about you know, people being open-minded. For example, I know that Pittsfield Police Department does an excellent job on having a mental health therapist go with them. Richard Collins, I believe his name is, and it goes with them on call. You know, so officers need to be educated on these situations, what to look at for warning signs, how survivors act in those situations, how potential alleged perpetrators are acting in those situations. And I think once, you know, everybody kind of is on the same sheet of music, we can start, like, you know, and also reaching out too. If you have a question about something that's happening in the house, you know, Elizabeth Freeman Center is always available 24/7 for consultations.
And I think I used to do this with my son. He would call up, and you have to listen. The lady that's saying, no, I don't want him arrested, you know, my son who used to come on, he'd get a call, and it was for a party or some gathering, right? And he'd say, Dad, what? I can't go to this thing tonight, right? What's the answer? Right. First couple times I didn't catch on. I said, oh, if you want to go. But when he was sending me a message,
he was giving you the answer.
That's right.
He was giving you the answer.
And I think sometimes in domestic abuse things, oh, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. And the cop, again, training, should be trained to listen for the underlying, I'll be fine.
Right. And in my opinion, I think the local police departments do
Oh,
an excellent job. And
It's every day.
And I agree. I think
Nonstop.
domestic violence situations are the more difficult and dangerous situations, you know, calls to go on. But, you know, education is ongoing. You know, things are always changing. We're learning new things about survivors. We're learning new things about perpetrators on a regular basis. So we need to keep up on the education and make sure that everybody has an understanding of, you know, what to do in certain situations.
The one thing that I don't know, it wasn't our show, but I was doing another show on this, maybe, I don't know. Anyhow, the person, I always found, and the person got really angry at me and said that's just an excuse, and I said, well, I'm just saying what I always found. In 90+% of the cases, alcohol, and this isn't alcohol. I wish I was, no. Alcohol was involved somewhere along the way. Now, that may, I'm not saying that as a justification. I'm saying it is, that was my observation. That.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that also something that we see in addition to alcohol is the issue of substances and addiction. A lot of victims are vulnerable in part because they struggle with addiction.
Right.
And that can make it very difficult for people to seek help.
Yeah.
And my office has really worked to better respond to victims and to get, if victims need drug treatment or they need other kinds of services to get those, because that's really critical to empowering victims so that they can get in a safer situation.
Yeah, and I would also say that when it is involved, a lot of times it's a coping mechanism for survivors, right? To dull the pain, because people are living in terror in their homes. But it's not always connected, right? I mean,
And I agree with that. And are there, on the police report, is there alcohol, is there drugs? A lot of times there is.
Right.
But, what we hold our participants accountable. And so when they start bringing in something like, I was drunk or else I wouldn't have done it, that's a very layered response, and there's many ways to go about educating them. But there's a lot of people who drink that don't abuse their partners.
Yeah.
So if there was always an exact correlation between drinking and abusing your partner, it would happen to everybody who drank. It's something else. It's something deeper. It's power and control. You need to hold yourself accountable and not use alcohol or drugs as being the excuse, the reason why you did something. Is it a factor? It can be, 100%, absolutely. But if you hang your hat, as a participant in our program, if you hang your hat and say, this is the reason why it happened, the likelihood of you getting something out of what we're trying to teach you is a lot less than the person that comes in and says, I'm an alcoholic or I did drink, but I made a decision to put my hands on my partner. They're going to get far more out of it than the person that's really hanging their hat.
Yeah, I can't use this as an excuse. It was just an observation on my part.
Right.
That in more the abuser than the abused, but I know what you're saying, and I know what you're saying, because if you're addicted, you are vulnerable, and because of your addiction, you put yourself in situations that if you weren't addicted, you probably wouldn't.
yeah, but abusers also encourage sometimes addiction, right? And you almost always see, that in terms of control or isolation, but also in terms of financial abuse, right?
Yeah.
You make people unable to work, or you forbid them from working, or you interrupt their school, or whatever. But it's a tool of control as well as a coping
I had a
mechanism.
very serious one years and years ago where the woman pleaded not to arrest her husband because of his where he worked, his status would be his job, and she said, I got 3 kids. And
That's real. That's real.
Very real. It doesn't matter what status you are.
and none of this was available.
Well, then unfortunately she gets, why didn't you just leave him? Why didn't you just go? They don't understand. She's thinking 5 steps ahead. How am I going to feed my children?
I used to hear that so much, and I'd say, and I wasn't anywhere coached like you guys are. Be with one of them and ask them why. Yeah. And the other piece, going back to you and your expertise, some of them were so afraid he'll kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'll kill me. And I used to think afterwards, yes, I think he would.
Yeah, people have a good sense. Well, they get threatened all the time, right? We hear that all the time. I'll kill you, I'll kill the kids, and there's
Which
enough.
I could never figure out. I can't figure it out any.
Right. But there's also, we need, and hopefully again through this task force, we can think through some better protections.
Right.
Because you're right, the police, no matter how good they are when they respond, their
Right.
hands are in some ways tied.
Yeah.
So, commonly you see even when the police arrest, the abusers let out in 4 hours or something, and it could be a really bizarre time of day. But
There's a lot of factors.
right, and they come back. Some police departments are kind of circling around and doing wellness checks on the, more dangerous cases that they identify, which is really good.
Yeah, I think, and again, going back to our Berkshire County, the Pittsfield police kind of know their people. I started in Lanesboro, and I knew my people, and I knew that on Thursdays at between 5 and 6:30, I would get a call to X house. And that, so, but what step, kudos to you and what you're trying to do with the abusers, and I know they don't use that term anymore, group, but because I think a lot of it is training. Kudos to you and what you've been doing over the past years. And kudos to you for just saying, let's put some heads in the room and see what we, I always go back because I'm old, but I always go back to John Kennedy. John Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon. But I can remember my father, yeah, and when pigs fly, or something like that. But what he did, and I applaud you for doing it on you've got a couple of really big initiatives. Put the best people in the room to put that man on the moon. Same right now what we're trying, no one person has the solution.
Well, and I think that speaks to the complexity of the issue at
hand. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to speak for Janis, but I know that I learned just as much from my interactions and collaborations with the Elizabeth Freeman Center as hopefully they learned from us in terms of us working with perpetrators. And I think that there's no broad brush. There's no magic. There's no magic wand. It really does take a multidisciplinary team that District Attorney Harrington is putting together to really combat this problem in society, and it takes open-mindedness. Working with perpetrators of domestic violence, a lot of people don't want to hear about that. A lot of people don't want to hear that we need to educate these men, that we need to work with these boys, these teens when they're younger, because it's just not in some places in society, just lock them away or just do this or just do that. So it really is us working collaboratively and figuring out the best solution to this problem, and it's going to be ongoing.
And again, I go back to it. Violence is a public health problem, and where criminal justice comes in, and I catch a lot of heat for this, but where criminal justice comes in, that's the hammer. Like if you have cancer, you'll get chemotherapy or radiation. If you're in the public health arena and you continue to abuse, then you get the criminal justice system. But I think it's early education. We hear that from everybody today. The younger we can get to kiddos, the more we can do to prevent the social ills of the late teenage years. And you guys are doing it. I mean, that makes me proud to know you guys.
Well, there needs to be a lot more.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no. Like I think Kyle said, it's so complex.
Yeah.
Yep.
I also think, we have a big county. I mean, this is the power of having,
geographically,
Andrea behind this effort and pushing this forward. We have 32 cities and towns spread out with varying levels of resources. This is an ongoing issue, and really we need to engage everyone in every one of those cities and towns in this effort. And I think, bringing on tools like assessment tools, developing hopefully better screening tools and things like that will just keep this issue up front where it should be.
And going back to we learn from each other. We also learn from the perpetrators.
Absolutely.
My greatest learning about violent youthful offenders is when I worked with them and was with them every day in informal settings, and that's where this one was an abuser and that one was an abuser, but that was a learned trade, and so as we as a group come together. And the other thing you brought up, Janet, and I think is critically important for any programs we develop, that the DA develops here, is we are an urban, rural, real rural county. We're not Boston. Boston is urban, with all its urban problems. We are cities, some big towns, and then some really rural towns. And the approaches may be different. I think,
It is very different.
where are we in Massachusetts? Because as far as domestic violence, somebody said we're number one, Berkshire County.
Oh, I haven't done that calculation.
Well, the statistic that we look at is in how many restraining orders
Oh, okay.
are, and so we are 33%
Higher than the state average. And that is
Requesting
true,
restraining
the levels of violence in rural communities, studies show they are higher, they're more chronic, they're more severe. So, and people speculate about why that is, they talk about isolation, they talk about the prevalence of guns.
Yeah.
The small knit communities. I mean, this is something people don't like to talk about or be exposed.
The stigma. The stigma
The
associated
stigma.
with it.
So people, don't talk about it. When we see people, it's usually after years of things going on, right?
Yep.
So
now, if you're out there and you're watching, and you find yourself in a situation like this, and you want help, call the Elizabeth Freeman Center.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we have a toll-free number, which is 1-866-401-2425, or you can call our main Pittsfield number at 499-2425. And you can check us out at our website, which is elizabethfreemancenter.org, or on our Facebook. But if you call us, we don't require that you even give us your name. We have special state law protections to protect your confidentiality, and we don't tell you what to do. So I would just encourage people to call, and then, we can help you connect where you need to go.
Kyle,
Yeah, so our program is as I said, it's a Department of Public Health certified program. It's a 40-week program. It's pretty intensive. The ways to get to our program are either through probation or through service plans for Department of Children and Families.
Okay.
But we also take voluntary referrals. So if you're in a situation where you feel like this is an issue you need to work on, you can give us a call at 413-358-4321. Ask to speak to myself, and we do take voluntary referrals into the program. So if it's something that hasn't gone through the system yet or hasn't gone through, please reach out for help. And if we can't help you, I can point you in a direction.
well, that's the key.
Yeah, I mean, for people who are looking for help from the district attorney's office, we have victim advocates that will help people devise safety plans. We will connect people with local law enforcement. We're really working with local law enforcement so that they do involve prosecutors and victim advocates early at the onset of any kind of investigation. People message me on Facebook, people send emails to the office, people pick up and call the office, and it is like Janis mentioned, when I started talking about this topic in public, every time I speak anywhere about this topic, I hear from people who are survivors or who are in current situations where they're being victimized. So it's so prevalent, and there is a lot of help and support. And in my office, we certainly want to help people and help keep people safe.
I can't thank you guys enough. As always, it's a hard topic. It's a topic that has to be brought into the public discussion. There's help available if you're out there and you're watching this. And Janis will tell you, you have kids, they know how to deal with the victim and the children, and they do it very, very well. Thanks for watching. It's not what I refer to as a Chamber of Commerce show. I do a lot of those. But this one is really important to me. God bless. Take care of each other. In every program you ask me why. It's real simple. Each other, it's all we have. I'll see you the next time. If you're out there and you're in trouble, get on the phone. Thank you.